Shall we go ahead and get started? I am sure we will have more participants joining. And it's so wonderful to see some familiar faces and new faces. So please, I want to welcome you to our Women's Wellbeing Lecture Series, brought to you by GW Resiliency and Wellbeing Center, with the generous support of Dr. Rosemary Bowes, PhD, Women's Mental Health Fund, designed to support well-being of women healthcare professionals. So today we are going to dive into a very exciting topic of debunking nutrition myths for women's well-being and aging with the help of our amazing expert panel. So let me introduce our experts to you. Julie Wendt, MS, is a licensed dietitian, nutritionist, and certified nutrition specialist. She is an adjunct instructor in the Department of Clinical Research and Leadership at the GW School of Medicine and Health Sciences. We also have Dr. Leigh Frame here, PhD, MPH. She's a nutrition scientist as a Chief Wellness Officer at GW Medicine. She's also a director of Resiliency and Wellbeing Center, Executive Director of the GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health, an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Research and Leadership and Physician Assistant Studies. And she's also a co-director of the Frame-Corr Lab here at the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. So she's wearing a lot of hats and has a lot of experience and expertise to bring to you. And unfortunately, our third expert, Dr. Lara Williams, had an emergency and might not be able to join us. But we will hope that we'll be able to cover a lot of territory and answer your questions related to nutrition and aging here with the two experts present. And I also want to say we are aiming to create a safe and curious space for all of us to explore things, that are interesting to us. And sometimes we might not necessarily have time to dig deep. That's why we have our experts here. So the structure of this event today is a little different comparing to our previous ones because we really want to hear from you. I will kind of warm us up and get started with a few questions that we hear a lot when we do different workshops and lectures. But I invite all of you to post your questions in the chat, and I will do my best to, read them out loud to our panelists, and we will hope to tackle as many as we can today. All right. So I want to get started with the one that is personally I struggle with as I age. And this is related to metabolism because nutrition and metabolism are often, linked, and rightfully so. So there is a belief that metabolism slows significantly as we age. And I see it myself as I'm aging some pounds. But is it really true? Right? And what can people do to maintain healthy metabolism despite of aging? And I'll let,
So Julie, I think I might just mention a little bit about what the research says and then turn it over to you for more practical tips. Does that work?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. So I think a lot of us hear this and we talk about it a lot, and it's sort of one of those just known facts. But what the research says is it's not exactly true. What happens is as we age, we tend to become less physically active. And so it's not our metabolism so much that's slowing, it's that we're actually not using as much energy. So that is a large part of what we're observing when we feel like our metabolism is slowing with age. That being said, hormones can affect satiety and weight gain, all of those things. So it's not solely that, but a large proportion is just we kind of lose physical activity. And this is why you can't really remove physical activity from nutrition conversations, because it's a really important weight maintenance, right? If you want to maintain your weight, you need to maintain your physical activity. Over to you, Julie.
Yes. So I agree. I think that we do see this happening, and the reasons are multifactorial, right? So it's like it's not just hormones, it's not just changes in physical activity. It can be looking at a little bit wider lens of inflammation and how your gut microbiome is, and what are you experiencing in terms of stressors, right? We're often, particularly nowadays, we can be a sandwich generation, right, where we're trying to care for older parents and younger kids, and just this it's sort of this confluence of all of these events that can feel like we haven't changed anything, but we're gaining weight. And I feel like that can be true, and it can also be this time in our lives where we are getting pulled in many directions, and as that happens, our nutrition starts to slip, our sleep starts to slip. If we're not sleeping, we're gaining weight. Our microbiome can get impacted, maybe by new medications, or changes in
Or
your
just the stress of it all.
and sleep and stress and exercise. And this is exactly what you say, that you cannot necessarily tease these things out from each other. It's that diet and lifestyle pattern that you just have to, as best as you can, keep investing day to day in what you can manage in terms of movement and protecting your sleep, and dialing it in, because I think what we used to get away with maybe when we were younger, we have less resilience.
Absolutely.
Our system is just not as robust, and in part because of the aging process and the hormone changes, but in part because of the life stage that we find ourselves in.
I think that's a really important point that is often overlooked is it might not be so much that your metabolism has changed, that you were not doing everything that you should have been doing before, but because of the resiliency of youth, you didn't see the effects. And as you get older, you start to see the effects. They start to add up over time. So I think that's a really important way of looking at it too. So now it's the time to like tune up everything, get things a little bit tighter, and try and do a little bit better with, all of those elements: sleep, physical activity, nutrition. And hopefully that will be enough to maintain.
Yes, and I think I've, you know, I've been learning more about how exercise should change as you age, and what is beneficial for women versus men in sort of how our body works, and ways to sort of mitigate the inflammation or the stress on joints while you're getting the results. And so thinking about shifting towards weight training for sure. And the recommendation is lift as heavy as you can for 8 to 10 reps and do 3 sets, right? It's different. It's doing sessions of sprint training on a bike, or swimming or running, however you do it, but having
Or high intensity interval training.
yeah, short bursts of intensity, and you just do 15 minutes, right? Um, and then like interspersing once or twice a week a longer cardio, um, lower heart rate kind of endurance. So it's like, I think these things didn't matter as much. And when we were younger and we were just like, okay, I'm just gonna do the bike for 45 minutes and call it a day. And now that's sort of like, well, when we're adding all of this together, we need to rethink how we're exercising so that we're both optimizing our time, which is probably our most precious resource, and really like sending strong signals to our muscles about being in an anabolic state, right? And sort of fighting against that natural.
Right. You got to use it or lose it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And Julie, you're making a very good point, because I want to say in a lot of countries, as people age, the movement kind of becomes, okay, I'm not working out. I am more like I'm walking. I am doing something less strenuous that may be more consistent. So I just move my body, right? Because you also have to be conscientious at certain age, every injury is surgery. So you want to be like very careful and keep that balance. But at the same time, just do move your body in various ways.
Mhm.
Yes,
um,
for sure.
Thank you so much for very detailed response. And I see Dr. Lara Williams is with us. It's very
Yay.
exciting to have you. And perhaps my next question might touch upon what Leigh mentioned earlier about how our hormones change over time, and that might be impacting the whole metabolism myth, right? And so I want to ask a question about nutrition and hormonal health and how our nutrition influence hormonal balance. And especially as we age, what can we do to keep things more or less even kill, if it's even possible?
Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, okay, sure. So changes in our hormones during the menopause phase will impact our body composition, right? And that's part of what we notice, like a tendency towards increased abdominal fat and lower lean muscle. And so we can think about a lot of what we just said in terms of helping to maintain a positive energy balance with your movement and your dietary intake. And that is all going to help to mitigate the impact of that loss of sex hormones. Again, it is somewhat true that we lose resiliency in our system and we have less wiggle room. And so being conscious and staying in alignment with what your energy needs are becomes very important, because if we've gotten away with that in the past, a lot of times now we no longer do. And so, you know, sometimes doing some journaling and trying to understand, like, how are you doing in your calorie balance? Thinking about really nutrient dense foods and trying to make good decisions in terms of when you're going to spend your calorie money, right? Are you getting the biggest bang for your buck in terms of foods that are high in vitamins and minerals, right? And so that's where maybe we could have some treats a couple of times a week or more. Sometimes it comes in, seems every day there's a treat. You know, we don't have the bandwidth so much, and we can see that as your diet is full of the nutrients that your body needs to function, that all of the symptoms associated with menopause are improved. So, you know, we can really see a dramatic shift as we include more anti-inflammatory foods in our diet. It helps your body process this change, and you know, it's going to improve the microbiome, which has a very important role in estrogen metabolism and hormone balance, and you know, how your brain works, if brain fog is something that's showing up. So diet is a really powerful tool, and I see it a lot, that we can make improvements and refocus on you know, no extreme diet is needed. You know, basics, Mediterranean patterns, like
Whole foods.
Whole foods. It doesn't have to get extreme or super restricted, but it does need to have that nutrient density.
And
That's fantastic. The
and
other oh,
hey,
Laura,
yes,
here.
yes, it's been
Go
a day.
for it.
The other thing that I would want to kind of put into there is how the lifestyle impacts all of this. How little we're sleeping impacts what we crave. It impacts when we have the space to be able to eat. And then we cope by having a little too much alcohol and a little too much treats. So the biggest thing that I see is, you can't get away with the things you could in your 20s and 30s, just like Julie said. Like, you can't pull it off. Like, you're going to get called out every single time that you do those things. But I think it's the cumulative impacts. Like, I can't tell you how many of my patients are like, I'm sleeping great, and then there's 2 nights that week that they only slept 4 hours. That 2 hour,
that's not great.
No, what is it? 3-fold increase in insulin resistance. If you're not getting, not an average of 7 hours, a minimum of 7 hours. So I think while we're talking about everyone's looking for that quick fix, and we're expecting, you know, we're going to change, we're going to start running 3 days a week, and we expect the weight to fall off like it did in our 20s, and it just doesn't. So I think I always tell people it's the whole comprehensive way of looking at it. And I think we forget that sometimes.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add is we talked about how, you know, loss of muscle mass is common and it's really important to resistance train. Well, coupled with that, we want to maximize muscle protein synthesis. And how do you do that? It's by getting enough protein, enough meals. So if you're eating 2 meals a day, then you're getting 2 opportunities to maximize your muscle protein synthesis. If you're getting 3 meals, you're getting 3. So 3 is probably a better way to go. The other thing is you want to make sure you're getting enough protein per meal. Generally, the guideline is 30 grams per meal will roughly maximize your muscle protein synthesis. And this seems to be a problem, particularly as we age. One of the things I frequently see is seniors a lot of times will have toast for breakfast. Where is the protein, right? That is not a meal. You need to have carbohydrates, protein, and fat in every single meal. And that is also a missed opportunity to build muscle. So if you aren't getting that 30 grams of protein at breakfast, you basically lost muscle. That's an opportunity that you've lost. So think about every time you eat as an opportunity to build muscle in addition to the resistance training. Like they work together. You can't just do one or the other. You need to have them together to really maintain and hopefully even build some muscle mass.
Yeah, that protein, I love that you said that. I tell people, and also you may need more than 90. If you are really weightlifting, like
Correct.
I have some patients who need like 120 grams of protein. I think that, you know, when you are starting to feel that abdominal weight come on, the first thing people do is cut calories. And the first thing that they do is they cut their proteins because protein takes time. And so everyone's looking for those quick meals. Or my favorite is everyone skips breakfast. I hate skipping breakfast. Breakfast is the opportunity to start your day, get the calories in when you're burning them, which is during the daytime. Like saving all of the calories until 9 o'clock at night disrupts our sleep. You're going to bed. So I think I always encourage people, in addition to those 30 grams of protein per meal at least, is really making sure that you're not eating too late. You know, you've got to be done that 3 to 4 hours before going to bed, so you're not disrupting your sleep. And I usually encourage people to have dinner be their lightest meal, and have lunch be your biggest meal, and breakfast be your second biggest meal, to really try to shift off that protein.
Yeah, agreed. And since we're talking about sleep, and there's a question in the chat about sleep, someone's saying they can't remember the last time they've had 7 hours of sleep and 4 hours is a regular event, but it's not that they're in bed trying. And that to me is what stands out. You actually don't want to do that. You don't want to lay in bed when you are not sleeping. It's absolutely crucial. And it's called sleep drive. What you're doing is you need to wait until you are sleepy and ready to go to bed. And then you get in bed and then you sleep until you wake up. And ideally you have enough time for that. Obviously, there's life. But it's how do you get yourself to get on that schedule, right? How do you train your body to say, I'm going to go to bed at this hour and it's going to be great. And a lot of the things that Lara just mentioned are part of it, right? Not eating 2 to 3 hours prior to bedtime, having a wind down routine where you're sort of like letting go of stress and letting go of the day. And it signals to the brain that it's time to sleep. And then only being in bed when you're sleeping or having sex. And this is a really important thing because otherwise your brain, it gets a little confused as to what the purpose of the bed is, right? Is this where we read? Is this where we hang out? No, it should be where we sleep. It should be when you go to bed, your body knows it's time for sleep and that triggers sleep. So you shouldn't be in bed longer than you're sleeping. I mean, if you want to wake up in the morning and relax a little bit, that's okay. But it's really important for that space to be kind of a sacred space for sleep.
You making
Go ahead, Victoria.
I was going to say that you all making very important points. I see a lot of more questions coming up in the chat right now. So I want to make sure we're not missing them as we go. So Lara, I know you wanted to say something. Please share, and then I think I will tackle a few questions that we have in the chat right now.
So yes, so first thing is on the sleep thing. As somebody who's been sleep disrupted for 25 years, actually it's probably closer to 30 now due to call, Things that I found that, and I am not a technology girl. So let me just preface what I'm about to say with I'm not a technology girl. When I was doing a TA for one of the George Washington integrative medicine seminars, one of the students did a paper on the Oura Ring and where it was helpful. And I can't sleep in a watch. Sometimes wearable technology is helpful to start figuring out, like, okay, you may think you're a night owl. You're not actually a night owl. You're somebody, one of my patients was like, I got to be in bed by 9. I feel really terrible. I'm like, girlfriend, I'm in bed by 8:30. So I think identifying where do you really need to be in bed? Somebody else in the chat also said, 90 grams of protein, that's a struggle. Part of it is starting to look at, you may be getting more than you think you are. It's also starting to build some of those meals. What is it, that has 30, 35 grams of protein in it? Okay, so once you have that, then I'm teaching my children how to do this. Start looking at, how do they supplement? Like one of the questions was, could you use collagen supplements? Actually, my daughter made a whole video about Mount Vesuvius using Cheerios and collagen protein powder, because that's how we get more protein into her cereal so that she actually gets that protein. Because my kids, like me, if they're not getting enough protein, are grumpy, and I don't want grumpy humans. So there are ways to add those things in. When somebody's talking about intermittent fasting, what I tell people is, if you're going to drop a meal, drop the dinner meal. Waiting until noon or 2 o'clock to start eating is, you're going to burn most of your calories by 2 or 3 p.m. And so if you don't start getting your calories until 2 or 3 p.m., yes, you've restricted your calories, but you're also restricting, as Leigh said, the opportunities for muscle mass and protein building.
Lara, great point. And I think we start tapping into questions about timing of your meals, right? And how that popular topic of chrononutrition. So I see a question. I learned from Ayurveda training that digestion is strongest between 10 and 2. Is that backed up by science, or it's a myth?
Well, I think there are a lot of variables in that question. One, there's a variable from individual to individual, but also your body responds based on what you schedule it to do. So if you eat at a regular time, that is the time that your body will be ready to digest things. And also your body is ready to digest things when it is awake and not when it is sleeping. So if you get up in the middle of the night and sleep, it's kind of a recipe for poor digestion and indigestion and poor sleep on top of that. So there's something to the 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then that it's like we're awake, our bodies are fully functional, we're moving around and burning calories. But I don't think we need to use that as such a hard and fast rule. And really, all of these things are really just guidelines too, right? So each person is a little bit different and you kind of need to figure out what works for you. I do not skip breakfast, but I have a very late breakfast. And I have a very early dinner. So my eating window is kind of contracted. And for me, that works. Because I'm able to get all of my food in, but also it gives me enough time where I'm fasted and I'm really getting good sleep and feeling healthy and not getting hangry, because I get really hangry if I don't do it that way.
Anybody else has insights on the timing of the meals that they want to add?
I think that I cannot emphasize, it is actually better for me, according to my Oura Ring, to skip dinner than to eat a late dinner. Like, that is how much it impacts my deep sleep and my quality of sleep. And everyone is different. And I think that's what I appreciate about what Leigh was saying, was that you need to know what your individual biorhythms are. And you may find that your rhythms are different than your partner's rhythms, which make for, some conflict.
It's challenging.
At times.
Yeah.
It can be very challenging, but it's really important to know what it is that your body needs from when is your best sleep. Like, I have one patient, her best sleep is from 2 to 4 a.m. Like, that is not my best sleep. That's when she's getting her deep sleep. That's her rest and recovery. So should she work out at 4 o'clock? Absolutely not. Like, she's not somebody I want getting up early and working out. So once you start knowing your own biorhythms, then you can, and I think that's where a lot of the biohacking is coming in, is they're looking at the individual person in front of you and trying to figure out what makes the most sense. So Reddit is applying more general principles instead of very specifics, and starting to know your own body allows you to kind of figure out what works for me. And for instance, what works for me is I got to go to bed early. If I'm in bed at midnight, because I've chosen to do that, I'm hosed all day. I don't have a choice with taking call, but I know this about myself, and I do not navigate from that, because when I diverge, I pay for it. And so it's really starting to figure out what are the things. And then the person who says, gosh, I've never gotten, more than 4 hours of sleep. I found also with my Aura Ring, like I find my Aura Ring is kind of like my best friend that sits on my shoulder and says, did you really think you were going to pull that one off? And I kind of need that in my life. But I got home late, but I had a very stressful delivery. And so I had to take a shower because I smelled terrible. And so because I took my shower, I did my normal wind down routine. So I did my wind down, I washed my face, I brushed my teeth, I did my stretching, I did my very normal wind down, thinking, oh my God, this is going to cost me an hour, and I'm already getting home at midnight. I'm not going to be in bed until 1. But I have to do this because I couldn't live with myself. I actually got better sleep that night than when I had gotten home on the previous night of call and not taken myself through my wind down. So it's really important to start knowing what it is true about you, and then to be able to adhere to those. And a lot of people, especially with small children, will say, but my nighttime is my quiet time. Great, if that's what works for you. That doesn't work for me. Like, I can't take that time. So I get up early to do that. My time that works better for my body and my brain is to get up early. And I've got people who are like, well, I don't want to get up early. But if that's how your body likes to work, now you're fighting your own biorhythms. And you can do that, but you're watching what your success rate is, which is being tired, being fatigued, not having the exercise stamina, all the things that Julie was talking about before.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to that in terms of meal timing. The composition of your meals, there's some research that it may matter over the course of a day. First thing in the morning, your body is a carb utilizing machine. It can eat carbs and use them very, very well. So that's something you can think about for your breakfast meal. You can eat carbs and not feel, I'm going to feel like not too much of a blood sugar spike. Obviously, it depends on if you have diabetes or whatnot. But as you go out through the day, your insulin resistance, even for those of us who don't have diabetes, increases. And so your ability to process carbs reduces throughout the day. And so how I like to explain that is that you can have pancakes for breakfast, but don't have pancakes for dinner, right? Like, you don't want to have that many carbohydrates at dinner. So just reducing your carbohydrates over the day can be another way to really fine tune your diet to really improve it in terms of what your body's looking for, how it's going to utilize the nutrition, and then also just it also helps a little bit with that sleep, right? You're digesting things. You're having a lighter meal. Maybe you're having some vegetables and some lean protein, and then it's easier to digest all of that later dinner and get a good night's sleep.
Excellent point. And I saw a question about replay of this. All our talks are recorded, so at the end you will get a recording of it. So don't worry about missing anything important. I know it's a lot of information, and you ladies covered a lot of territory, and I'm trying to also kind of extract some of Azure questions in the chat that we didn't touch upon. And we've talked a little bit about supplementation here, but I want to kind of, I guess, elaborate more on that because some of the questions are about supplements. So do we really feel like dietary supplementation is needed as we age, or we can manage by diet alone? And then if so, what kind of diet should it be, and if it's realistic to give?
So I'm going to throw out a general principle and then let Julie and Lara talk about the details. So generally, food first, right? We want to get as much nutrition from our diet as possible. That's actually the reason they're called supplements, right? They're meant to supplement the diet. So if your diet is coming up short, you can use these to improve upon that. And as we age and our desire to eat actually often reduces, it can be really difficult to get enough food. And so that's where supplements may be an option, but you always want to try and do it with diet first.
Yeah, and
Completely. Go ahead, Julie.
yeah, thanks. I would say that what I find in practice, and of course, people that end up in my practice are there because often they're working to address a certain concern. So I think food first and maintaining a nutrient dense dietary pattern. There's no research that suggests there's one pattern above all others. It really is something that I think as long as you're getting sufficient protein, including fiber rich foods, and plant, the majority of your plate has plant foods on it, that is where the research kind of comes together and there's wide agreement, and which is great because everyone will have different backgrounds and family traditions, and just knowing that the way you eat can vary and yet the consistent themes are important. So I think that having a dietary pattern that is nutrient dense is helpful. And then there are things that happen as we age, or maybe medications that change how our digestion works. And that is where sometimes diet cannot be sufficient. So particularly thinking about vitamin D, that's pretty difficult to get through dietary intake unless you're consuming a lot of fortified milk. So that's something that I often end up supplementing with and using the serum markers as a guide. Thinking about the use of PPIs and helping control acid reflux, that can change your ability to absorb B12 from your foods. And so, that among other medications like metformin, there are reasons and things that happen in our health history that can require additional support. And that's where, I think nothing is going to be cured with supplements alone. The food has to be the anchor, but there's definitely many cases where we can add some higher dose supplements to support how your body works and create better balance.
And I would also add in iron, especially in menstruating women. I think that if you look at what the standard is for up to date, we want to see a ferritin level of 50. The number of patients that I have who menstruate who have an iron level of 50 is probably less than 10%. So I would say that iron would also be on that list for me. Vitamin D, especially if you're in one of the northern latitudes, like I'm in a state where you can't get vitamin D from the sun from October to March. So I think to Julie's points, it's really knowing what it is about your diet, and are you doing food chemistry, especially in the vegetarian vegan population. There's a lot of food chemistry that needs to go in, and we really want to be making sure that we are getting sources of B12, and are you getting enough folate, and then with our soil becoming more nutrient deplete, I'm also seeing need for magnesium in a lot of patients. And then, thyroid stuff, selenium, you just can't do the Brazil nuts and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to get plenty, which I used to be able to say 15 years ago. I can't say that same thing now.
Great points. And I see a lot of the questions in the chat are also about protein supplements. So let's touch on that. First, there are many different types of protein supplements. The literature has almost exclusively studied whey protein isolate. And so it's difficult to sort of speak about the other ones, and particularly with direct head-to-head comparison. That being said, it's really about how many of the amino acids do they contain, right? If they have a little bit of all of them, then you're probably good to go. That's what we'd call a complete protein. One of the main amino acids in terms of muscle protein synthesis is leucine. So you want to make sure that your protein supplement has sufficient leucine content in it. And you can kind of compare across them. You'll see that some of the plant ones that are just a single source are a little lower, but when you find the mixed ones, though, they're usually looking pretty good. In terms of collagen, while it is a source of protein, it is an incomplete protein. And so you're not getting everything. Now, if you are having lots of different types of food, and particularly if you aren't a vegan or vegetarian, I'm not so worried about that. And there are other benefits to collagen protein supplements, namely a joint lubrication and movement seems to be affected by that. I have to say, scientifically, I don't know why, because it shouldn't make a difference. It should just be like any other protein supplement, but that's what the literature starts to be. It starts to say that it makes a difference. If you care about your joints, perhaps the collagen supplement may be kind of doing double duty.
Yeah, I find the use of supplements for increasing protein intake to be very helpful, particularly if you are, trying to hit some of those upper ranges, 100, 120 grams per day. It can be challenging to get that through food, particularly if you're fasting. And I think a lot of it comes down to, taste and texture. I also think I'm a kind of a stickler for the quality of supplements and knowing the source and using brands that are doing, third-party testing and using bioavailable forms of nutrients. And so that's one thing that isn't really a question, but it's definitely something that I love to kind of sprinkle in as often as I can, because I just had a case last week where, a patient was told to add whey protein, and so they grabbed something off of Amazon and was fecal
Don't buy from Amazon.
I know, fecal incontinence from it, and was like worried. And I said, well, let's take this out because I think the type of sugar that's in there is not reacting well with your GI tract. And sure enough, so it's like we want, more so than any other area, to be confident that what is in the bottle is on the label, nothing more, nothing less, that the dosing is accurate. And really, I think the only way to do that is to use brands that their manufacturing processes are up to standard and clear, and they're testing raw materials every batch, and they're testing their end products, so that we can use it to support health and it doesn't become something that is creating symptoms that nobody wants.
Before we move forward on that, I have to make a point about adulterants and contamination, because particularly protein powders, it seems to be an issue. Anytime you're concentrating something down, no matter what's in it, it's getting concentrated, right? So that could be heavy metals like lead, cadmium, arsenic. And I was recently interviewed about protein powders in particular, because cocoa powder is also a source of these. So if you were getting a chocolate protein powder, you're actually really increasing your risk of exposure to these heavy metals, dependent on the quality of the powder and whether they're doing their due diligence and testing all of those things. So, but that's, as much as I love chocolate, I feel like that's one thing that's pretty easy. Just don't get a chocolate protein powder. Enjoy your little square of chocolate. Get a different flavor of protein powder.
Yes, that's a hard sell as a chocolate.
Me too.
Oh, that's just not fun. That's just not fun.
Well, and I think it was Leigh who said, don't get things off Amazon. Not to knock Amazon, like it's not a political piece. Amazon it doesn't guarantee that what is in the bottle came from the manufacturer that it said it came from, or is the supplement that it said. I had a patient, I wanted her to try something. She's like, I've been on that before. And I said, please get it from the source that I'm going to source it to you from. She got it and she came back and she said, same label, same bottle, different capsules. And she actually had the other one from the one she'd purchased from Amazon. So that's this is an $8 billion a year industry. I always say, like, it fell off the back of the truck out of China. So, Julie's point too, you need to know the brands, you need to know who's doing third-party testing, you need to do your due diligence to investigate, is this real? And while Amazon is very, very convenient, you can literally buy something that you think is real, do what you think is happening, and it is not guaranteed.
Yes,
and they will not guarantee it.
I had a patient who bought the brand and exactly what I said, but used Amazon. 2 bottles, one was full, one was sealed but empty. And that, and that really
Mm,
landed my point home very nicely. Like it's the Wild West. You have to be working with a provider and a distributor that's, exactly how that product has been handled for its entire lifetime.
Since we are talking about safe brands, can you recommend some to our participants that they can, purchase and feel have a peace of mind that that's legit?
Most of the brands that I like would be considered professional brands, and so you're going
mhm.
to get access to those through a licensed provider. Designs for Health, Metagenics, Biotics Research, Thorne.
Mhm.
There's a lot of really good ones, Seeking Health, Integrative Therapeutics. And so they're therapeutic grade. So a lot of times the dosing is high. We're wanting to use them for specific interventions. And they all make really clean protein powder in all the varieties, right? So plant-based and collagen and whey and all of that. So those are my favorites. Do you guys have any others that I missed?
That's generally how I would approach it as well, which is it behooves you to be working with a healthcare provider when you're talking about supplements for many reasons. One, they can help you get access to these higher quality ones, but two, this is where you can start to go off the rails. It's hard to overdo things too much with diet, but when you start taking supplements, you could overdo things and put yourself at risk. So working with a healthcare provider.
Nature Made has a CoQ10 that you can get at Costco. That is one of the things at Costco that you can purchase, the CoQ10. But the rest of, because somebody asked about the Costco brands, they're not. And that's what, if you look at a lot of the studies that were originally done with vitamin supplementation, were basically pulling something off a grocery shelf. So they'd pull it off the grocery shelf and then they would, give the patient that, and then they'd be like, and this doesn't work. And so it's hard to know, and that's where a lot of Western trained practitioners have come into, supplements are stupid, vitamins are stupid. And you get that yes, if you get stuff that is not what it says it is, it's less than what it says it is, it's not manufactured, it's got extra lead and cadmium and in it. So I, again, to Julie and Leigh's points, both yes, having people that that you trust, that are, this is what they do, this is what they're trained in. And you also have to be watching people's credentials and verifications. There's a difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist. There is a difference
Or
between
some
a health.
people are both, like Julie.
100%, but Julie's got all of the credentials behind her. Like that's
Yeah.
that's that whole thing. You want to look at, what did somebody train, where did they train, how did they train, what is their certifications, what is their experience, because there are a lot of people who are setting up in the health coach space right now who have minimal to no training.
Yes. The whole business model of social media influencer selling products, it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. If someone is recommending a product to you and there is a link, they're probably making money off that product. Now, maybe they truly believe in that product, but you just need to know that they are probably making money off that product and take that and weigh that in your decision-making process.
Mm-hmm.
And what's driving it is really our desire to live longer, healthier, and all this good stuff that, especially, for us women, it's very important how we look. We want to look younger. So I want to shift a little bit to nutrition and aging and what can we ladies do to actually, promote those good things, but in a healthy way. Just don't go to extreme there, right? And I know one of the things that, I'm guilty of, we are trying to go on some magic diet, right? Or restrict something, for that miraculous overnight effect that never happens, but we hope for. So is there actually, I guess, value in those, restrictive diets, fasting, and all the popular things we hear about on the media?
Well, I can take a first swing at this one. I really like this question in part because on the surface it seems straightforward, but really if you peel it back a little bit, the layers go back to where we started with this, which is there's nothing magical about a superfruit from the Amazon that is going to change your health if your diet and lifestyle are not at a baseline dialed in. So all of the things that we've been talking about are the first places to pay attention to when you're trying to optimize your current health, and also beauty from the inside out, right? Like improve your aging process and this concept of longevity. So the sleep and the movement and stress management and social connections and all of that, for me, that takes up about as much time and energy as I can muster. and I think that I just want people to feel like that's a lot, and that is beautiful and wonderful. If we can do all of that and have our professional lives and our friends and do good things in the world, I hope we're all happy with that. On top of that, if you have extra bandwidth, for me it's a matter of just managing inflammation, and maybe there are some either events in your health history or genomic predispositions that make you more pro-inflammatory. And that's where the use of some of these higher antioxidant, anti-inflammatory compounds can be helpful. But yet we can also get those, through choosing herbs and spices in our cooking that kind of adds that nutritional punch, and making sure we're not eating things that are creating inflammation, which can be a very personal thing, right? So something can create inflammation for one person, but not for another. So I think spending time and energy to really assess that on an individual basis and optimize as much of that is the best longevity plan that I've ever come up with.
Yeah, totally second that. I would point out that part of the reason that is important is because of stress, right? So if you are stressing yourself, and I tell this over again, don't stress yourself out over diet and lifestyle, because that's sort of undoing all the good that you're doing, right? And I like to use the rule 80% health, 20% life, right? So 80% of the time I'm trying to do the right thing, and 20% of the time, you know what, life happens. And I'm not going to stress myself out about it. And for me, that works. Maybe that'll work for you. Maybe you need a different percentage. But I think it's really important to kind of put things in context.
And I think also it's just remembering the basic stuff. Don't smoke. Drink water, filtered water, because again, city water, they don't filter out all the hormones. And so endocrine disruptors, those kinds of stuff. So something as simple as a Brita filter. What I try to do is keep it very simple. And I think also recognize that, I've made my entire career in women's health. I find women are, I'm listening to James Clear's Atomic Habits right at the moment. And I think that one of the things I find myself guilty of is trying to make the big jump instead of the little step. When I make the little steps, for instance, I now take the stairs up to my office every day. That's 7 flights. I just do it once a day. I do not try to do it more than once a day. I started off with just once a day. And you know what? I do it every day. And when I do those little changes, those just little bitty ones, I'm successful, just like he's saying. And I think when I try to make that big jump because I'm trying to, I need to be doing X and I shame myself. And so I think the other thing that I see a lot in women is we shame each other and we shame ourselves. And so it's also, I love Leigh's perspective on that life piece. Like, we really do want to make sure that we are allowing things that happen to happen. Like, birthday cake happens, ice cream happens, a glass of wine with friends happens. Like, it's about really trying to make sure, are we laying some foundational pieces down so that when life happens, we've been taking care of it 80% of the time, we don't really notice it. When 80% of it is, I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, I'm overextended, I'm overexhausted, then that's a different ballpark. And then I really want to put a promotion hat for hats and sunscreen, because I think that, when you want to protect, and I'm in a huge melanoma state. So while we don't get as much sun, we get tons of melanoma because nobody's wearing sunscreen, they're not wearing hats, they're not protecting their skin. So part of, keeping ourselves healthy is making sure that we are protecting from other things. Like, I travel with a hat anytime I'm going somewhere with the sun. And it makes a big difference. I tried to figure out what my mother has done to look so amazing for so many years. And she lives clean, but more importantly, she wears hats. So
That's a good one too. You don't have to worry about reapplying.
exactly.
Well, a lot of what you are mentioning here is really based on our brain, right? What we believe about what motivates us, how our perception works on certain things. But as we know, with age, our cognitive function changes. So are there any recommendations you can give us about foods that support that cognitive function and hopefully, help us be more motivated, more persistent and consistent with what we are trying to do?
I have one, and then I'll turn it over for you guys for details. So my one is if there is a superfood in the world, it is pulses. That is beans and lentils. They are incredibly good for your gut, which fuels your brain. So you need to take care of your gut to take care of your brain. So the dietary guidelines for Americans are being redone right now, and they're currently increasing the intake, the weekly intake of pulses and lentils. I believe it's to 2.5 cups, and it was 1.5 cups previously. The problem with this is most people are not getting the 1.5 cups a week. So I feel like we're kind of missing the point here. If you guys can try and get to the 1.5 cup, I'm gonna be really happy, right? 2.5, it's like this is like the extra special goal, the 2.5 cups. If you're like already at 1.5 cups and it's easy, try to get to 2.5 cups. But if you can get to 1.5 cups of pulses, that's lentils or beans, a week, you are doing a lot for your gut and brain health. I'm done.
And then I would say I fall into, I believe, what Dale Briesman's talking about with diabetes, being that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. Like, I really find that blood sugar connection to the brain connection really matters. And so if your blood sugar is starting to push up, you are like, that has long-term cognitive effects. And when I have patients that are terrified they're getting Alzheimer's, one of the first questions I ask is, did the family member that they're worried about have blood sugar issues? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. And that terrifies me, because I think that, and that's where this protein matters. And that's where, making sure that, when Leigh is talking about the carbohydrates, that our carbohydrate intolerance increases through the day as insulin resistance increases. It's so important. Like, I'm watching people's hemoglobin A1C as early as I can to see who's on that pathway and how do we get them off that pathway. So that would be my big plug, is really watching that blood sugar.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to it is sort of thinking about healthy fats in the diet. And I think there was a question earlier about seed oils, and this, I think, is a big debate in the nutrition world. And it has been a lot in the news. So, my perspective is that whenever you're able to eat the whole food, you are getting access to fats that are typically going to be preserved in their structure such that they're not going to create inflammation as they get absorbed into your body. So better to eat avocados and walnuts than it is to have those as oils that you add to your food and cooking. When you've got oils that are liquid at room temperature, as seed oils typically are, they are going to have a really higher chance of becoming oxidized because the way their chemical structure is just very fragile. So from the processing in the initial stage to being exposed to air and light and heat, these are all oils that are often, if we use them, going to sort of add oxidation to our body rather than be a helpful constituent for our nervous system and our brain and all of that. So I think that's an important piece to helping manage inflammation, is to look for sources of healthy fats in the diet. And if you're going to use fats and oils in your cooking, be mindful of the quality. Some of what you want to see when you think of like olive oil or even avocado oil is that there's this beautiful rich green color. You want those to be packaged in dark glass bottles, and you want to store them away from the light in a cool place. So following some of those practices can also help. When you think about your brain, it's 60% fat, and so having a steady supply of healthy fats in the diet, I think, can be another piece to focus on.
I love that. I would just add one small nuance on top of that, is that olive oil brings all these antioxidants with it. It's got like its own little protective layer. And so of all the oils that you can get, a nice extra virgin olive oil is going to be super protected from oxidation. So that's part of the reason that I tend to recommend olive oil as your sort of main fat if you're looking for something like that, in addition to everything that Julie said.
Yes, and I think unfortunately that there's been some people trying to make money on the olive oil trend, and so you want to be mindful of where the olive oil is coming from, and that it's a brand that's actually, it's olive oil and not like mostly canola oil with a smidge of olive oil added at the end. So
Very good point.
yeah.
Excellent points. And I think we have time for one more question in the chat. Which are the best beans to eat, since we are talking about legumes?
All of them. All of them are the best. My number one thing with diet is diversity of diet, right? The best thing is to get as many different things as possible. And that's true even with beans. So don't just pick one, pick a few, rotate them in your diet. And if you're adding a little bit here and there, then maybe that 1 week is your garbanzo week, and the next week is your black bean week. And that's totally cool too. It's just switching it up. It also makes it taste better because you get bored of eating the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I do love butter beans. Butter beans are really good.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the best bean is the one that you like just at that, there's no research to say one better than the other, but if it's one, there's certain ones that you enjoy, then we always want to have food be a source of enjoyment and joy.
Ooh, that's the perfect ending. Yeah, it's important to enjoy the food and the company you are with while you are eating it.
Yes.
That's an excellent final thought. I want to say thank you so much for your insights. I think I personally feel very enriched, and I am sure the rest of our audience learned a lot of new things. And like I said, recording is available to you after we are finished here. And thank you so much for participating. And be on the lookout for the next Women's Wellbeing lecture on cardiovascular health that we have coming up.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.